By virtue of the authority conferred upon me as Vice-Chancellor, I constitute this Assembly a congregation of the University of Cape Town.
Please remain standing for the singing of the National Anthem. Thank you. You may be seated. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to invite Anda Lubilo, a member of the SRC, to read the university dedication, for which I will request you to stand again as he reads it. Asanda?
At this time of celebration, we, the members of the University of Cape Town, reaffirm our mission to nurture rational and creative thought and free inquiry, to strive for excellence in teaching and research, to educate for life, and to address the challenges of our society. We undertake to advance these ideals in a spirit of freedom and responsibility, and through consultation and debate. We celebrate our benefactors and predecessors, those who have built the fabric and nourished the values of UCT. To those of you who will graduate today, we wish courage, wisdom, and purpose. To those who will leave the university to learn and work elsewhere, may you be sustained by those values which unite us here today and advance them in the world beyond. A love of truth and of learning, and of this, our university. Thank you.
Thank you, Asanda. You may be seated. This is for real. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, we are delighted to invite postgraduate opera singer Masabane Cecilia Rangwanasha to perform Summertime from the musical Porgy and Bess by George Gershwin for us today. That's the vibrant South African College of Music, a jewel in the crown of the University of Cape Town, and at the forefront of music making in South Africa and internationally. And today, we featured a star-studded lineup of postgraduate South African College of Music alumni who are excelling in their fields internationally. The procession was led by Sky Dladla, and Black Roots Marimbas who are preparing for their Sounds of Mukwa tour to Mozambique in August. The national anthem was accompanied on the organ by Alexios Vikatos, who has recently submitted his master's in the field of X-ray crystallography in chemistry and is continuing with a PhD in the same field. Isn't that amazing that he plays the organ in that way as well? And I'm told that he fixes our watch also at the music college. Pianist Eben Wachenstrom, who graduated with honors from UCT in 2015, is currently studying for his doctorate of musical arts at the University of Cincinnati. Eben is in demand as an international piano soloist who has performed twice in Carnegie Hall, amongst other illustrious places. Thank you, Eben, for joining us today. Masabani Cecilia Rangwanash, amazing soloist who sang Summertime from the musical Porgy and Bass by George Gershwin, will be performing in the touring South African production in South Korea in September. She just returned from the Tbilisi International Competition in Georgia, where she reached the semi-final round, and we can hear her sing in July in the Mandela Trilogy at the Artscape. Ladies and gentlemen, join me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for blessing us with your art. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, parents, families of graduates, step-parents, and anyone else who helped pay UCT fees or gave a monthly stipend to our graduates, friends, partners, and lovers of graduates. There may also be students in the hall who are hoping to graduate soon, and people who just came to this ceremony to watch because, like me, you are graduation junkies. Welcome to this graduation ceremony. Graduation is one of the most memorable events in anybody's life. It comes at the end of a long journey of hard work and balancing competing demands, trying tests and exams, and too many nights of staying up late to finish sometimes impossible assignments. This ceremony represents your ability to overcome the many challenges that may have come your way during the past few years whilst you were studying here at UCT. All the music, all the ropes, and all the pomp and ceremony that surrounds this day are meant to mark this single decisive moment of high transition in your life as graduates. As with all such moments of transition, it is an occasion both to take stock of the past and to assess the bright but inscrutable future that lies before us. Moments of transition, such as this one, hang suspended between past and future. They are comforting because they are familiar. They culminate all that has gone before. But they are also bittersweet, because something must end in order for change to take hold. And in every ending is the challenge of a new beginning. Moments like this are therefore charged in part with excitement of new creation, but also in part with the vague disquiet of the unknown. So let me assure you that your future, graduates, is bright. You are now equipped with a degree from one of the top universities in the world, the best that Africa has to offer. You have acquired magnificent friends and astonishing peers. You've been trained by the best scholars. And you have earned the support of an institution that will stand by you throughout your career. And yet, of course, in the nature of things, the future remains uncertain. You are here this morning poised at the knife edge between what you have achieved over the past several years and what you will make of yourself in the years to come. Let me tell you, you are not alone. Today, we mark another moment of transition in the life of our university, as Dr. Max Price, who has been Vice-Chancellor for the past 10 years, will be leaving us in 8 days. As a way to say thank you to him, we have asked that he address the graduating class for the last time as Vice-Chancellor of the University of Cape Town. I have no doubt that he will inspire us, but also that he'll give us hope for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Max Price to the stage.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor Designate, for that warm welcome and for introducing me. Graduates, ladies and gentlemen, faculty, it's wonderful to have such a fantastic turnout. My theme is also the theme of transition. Today is a day of celebration, a day when the University of Cape Town as an institution celebrates and rejoices in your successes as graduands, in performing a key part of our mandate for government and for the country, in producing for the country highly skilled professionals who will not just fulfill their role in the economy, but will change the society. It's a day of celebration for you and your families after years of hard work and their support, and we thank them for their support. And it's a transition, as you heard, for the university. Graduations, for me, when I look back over the decade, have been the most inspiring moments, the highlights of my decade as Vice-Chancellor, and I've tried to preside in person over as many of them as possible, precisely because they are such a highlight. I have sometimes meet the family members of 3 generations, all of whom take enormous pride in having studied at UCT and assume that their children will continue to come here in the next generation, and see this as not just a place where they came for 3 or 5 years to get a degree, but as something that has shaped their traditions and their families and generations, and their lives are interwoven with that of the university. They continue as alumni, as members of convocation, to play a role, as donors, as supporters. They cannot imagine a life through those generations without UCT. And I know that some of you are from those families and are here tonight, this morning. But even more exciting for me has been being introduced to a graduate's parents who come from a village in Limpopo, who have a few years of schooling, who have never been to Cape Town before, who have, in some cases, never seen the ocean before, and they're here to observe and witness and support their loved son or daughter who is graduating. And not only are they seeing the ocean in Cape Town, but this magnificent university, which almost comes out of the pictures of books that they might have been exposed to. And then they see and clap and ululate as their son or daughter gets capped. And you can see, and I can see, the impact of this higher education, of this university, of higher education in general, in transforming society, in changing the lives of that individual, of the family, of the village they come from, of the community. And I know then, and I rejoice on behalf of the faculty, because this is an experience which is shared by all of us, that our work is rewarded, that we're making a difference, that the institution is changing not just individual lives, but the society. And knowing that is the sort of acme, the highlight of all that we've been doing, the years of preparation, of lectures, of seminars, of tutorials, of preparing our students, of selecting them, supporting them, examining them, and ultimately graduating them. And that is the proof we need for what we do and what keeps us going. So graduations have always been the highlight, and today's graduation will also, you will see, reflect the spectrum of what we contribute to society, because it isn't only the changing of individual lives and the changing of the fortunes of a community, but it's also a contribution to the knowledge of the country and the world. And at today's graduation, you will see a large number of PhD graduates, and I urge you to look through the program where there's a description of what their research has been about as in getting their PhDs. You'll also hear the titles read out as they graduate. And what will become immediately obvious is three things. First, that we as a university are contributing at the cutting edge of knowledge globally, that many of these subjects are subjects which contribute to global science and global knowledge, whether in astronomy or in basic science chemistry or in understanding how society works. And that puts us up there with the best in the world. That is what gives us a reputation of being the top university in the continent and one of the great universities of the world. And we must protect that precious asset that we have. The second thing you'll observe is that there are very few topics that are somehow esoteric and not relevant to addressing real problems in our society, real challenges that we face. And that knowledge itself is not just boosting the reputation of the university, but is making a contribution to finding solutions to the problems that we face here in Cape Town, in South Africa, and in the continent. And the third, you'll notice by listening to the names of the people who are called up, is the diversity of our student population, and especially of our doctoral students, who come from many countries in the world, but especially many countries in the continent. Nearly a third will come from other countries in Africa. And that signals the role that UCT plays in the continent as an engine of knowledge production and as the nursery for the future academics of the continent, in positioning ourselves as the hub of an intellectual network and an academic network across the continent. Many of those PhD graduates will be going back to become academics in their own countries, in their own universities, and they will continue to collaborate with us, continue to develop joint research projects, and that is the third key to our positioning of UCT as a global player. This role we play as a hub in bringing together the academics and knowledge producers of the continent, of the rest of the world, and of South Africa. So this graduation ceremony really represents that and captures for me what have been the highlights, many of the highlights of the decade. And then there's another area in which this graduation ceremony, when I reflect back on this decade that I've been in office, signals change, and that is what it says about transformation. The transformation, in one sense, is obvious through the graduates themselves and the demography of the graduates. But the ceremony has changed. While we still follow the traditions, such as wearing academic gowns and capping graduates and conferring honorary degrees, the UCT ceremony now is also transformed to reflect and to be more inclusive, to reflect a variety of cultures and heritages. The music, the African music that we heard as we walked in, the Mbongi, who you will hear shortly, the isiXhosa praise singer opening the proceedings. Many of our students choosing to and encouraged to wear cultural and traditional dress with their graduation gowns. Families taking full advantage of traditional ways of singing praise, ululating, dancing in the rows as the graduates' names are called. So transformation has many dimensions. One of those is the symbolism of our events and of the university. And in that respect, we have also undertaken significant debate and discussion around the symbols more widely of the university. With the removal of the Rhodes statue in 2015, the revisiting of the curation of artworks in the university, the renaming of buildings and places and streets, the attempts to change the culture of the institution and the commitment to make it a more inclusive culture, the multilingual language policy, and many other aspects of transformation. There is also a long way to go. And when thinking about a decade, it's appropriate to reflect both on successes and failures. And while there have been many successes, an area where we have not made sufficient progress has been in the numbers of senior black academics at the professorial and associate professorial level, growing our own timber still is a challenge. So we are making inroads. They are fragile, but there is progress. For example, in the last year, more than 2/3 of all new academic staff appointed were black South Africans. And so we can see the change happening, but for that to reach the highest levels will still take some years. We have also run many projects in communities and fulfilled our role as a university that reaches out and is responsive to the social changes and challenges around us. These are some of the highlights, but as I say, there have also been challenges. And in thinking about the message for graduates and the transition that you are making as you graduate today, it is worth reflecting I was thinking, what is the leadership lesson that I would pass on to you based on my experience of the 10 years leading this institution? And it is that along with the successes come failures and challenges. There have been highs and lows. And the message or the quote that I have fallen back on when I have faced particular challenges is one from Winston Churchill, which I want to pass on to you. Many of you, the MBA graduates, are going to, I expect, become leaders in your field, leaders in businesses and in communities, and will face both successes and failures, challenges and stresses. And this quote from Winston Churchill might also be useful for you. He said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." And that is the leadership message I would like to leave with you. And then one final message. As you graduate from UCT, we know and have confidence that the quality of your degree, what you've learned, your technical competence is superb. The university's reputation establishes that. But we hope that as a graduate of UCT, you also leave with a value system and that you will implement that. The business world in the last decade, since the financial crisis in 2008, has actually suffered a serious dent to its reputation in terms of integrity and ethics. Whether you're in banking or in auditing or in consulting, many of the people we've looked up to for decades as providing the leadership in the business world and in the commercial industrial world have been found wanting in the areas of integrity, honesty, and ethical practice. The challenge to you as you go out is to make sure that you remedy that reputation, that you practice ethically, but also that you make a difference not just to your own lives, no doubt you will, in a material sense and in your success as individual leaders, but to the society around you, recognizing that you are enormously privileged to have had a tertiary education, to have had a postgraduate education, to have had an education at the University of Cape Town, puts you in a very small, tiny elite in the country of people who have had those benefits and privileges. And with that comes a responsibility to make a difference to society, to address the issues of inequality and injustice, and to use the knowledge, the competence, the positions you have to make those changes. So returning to the theme of transition and thinking about your futures, there are risks involved, there will be failures involved, you will achieve nothing if you do not take those chances and take those risks. And I close with a quote from Mark Twain, which I think is especially appropriate for a graduation. He said, 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you did not do than by the ones you did. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, and discover. I wish you well for your futures. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Price, for the speech and giving us hope for the future and that reassurance that it may be tough, there may be failures, but we should keep going. It's been a pleasure working with you, sir. The university has been very fortunate in the last 10 years. You brought your whole being to the job, and it happened. There were rough times, there were good times. You laughed, you cried with us. You stood up. When the university needed someone to stand, you stood up. And sometimes took the pain. And we want to thank you for doing that, not just for yourself, but for us as the staff, and for our students who sometimes might not realize that that's what you're doing. It's in their interest. Thank you very much, Dr. Price. Ladies and gentlemen, can you stand and give him a hand? Thank you. You left us with a few quotes, so I'm going to give you a quote. I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's a quote from someone. It's not mine. And it says, when a good leader's job is done, the people say they did it themselves. So when you are in your retirement, Max, and people go on as if you never did anything, and you see them owning things that you started, that you did, don't complain. That's a good leader's job. Well done. So, we are celebrating. As we celebrate our Vice Chancellor in his last graduation ceremony, we celebrate you as well. And I encourage you to ululate and say your praise poems as you do for your loved ones, because that's what we do in Africa when we celebrate. During graduations, weddings, funerals, we celebrate people through praise singing. And praise songs or praise poems communicate who we are as a people, the rivers, the valleys, the mountains, and the animals that we are associated with, what we stand for, how brave we are, how wise we are, how smart we are. And if you come from my family, it's also how beautiful you are. You're probably sitting there and wondering, but where do these praise poems come from? Who composes them? Well, they're composed by imbongi, praise singers, who are not only composers, but they're also orators of poems and praise. One of the important roles of imbongi, praise singers, is to offer critical commentary and narrative on the state of society through their izibongo. And here to offer a poem of praise this morning in Umbongo, in honor of the graduates, their families and teachers, academics, professors, is artist, and UCT music education graduate Nelly Swa Sampi Ngunyelwa, also known as Sange. She's currently finishing her honors in music education here at UCT. And ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to join her when she invites you to sing together with her. Sange, over to you.
Sathani nje sizibambe ngenkophi inyembezi ngoba siyahamba isihlahla sihambayo ewe kaloku wena uyimvuze kububele ukhokela ngoncimo kablankethe hamba kwedini yosikhonzela ewe kaloku uyithatha imijinga wayibuyisele ekhaya amathenga wetyala kwedini okagaba ucingo washo umuntu omlamba uthi kumsuthu umjobi ephuma sithi ndiyoko ndinje phuma ndiyoko andiva hayiwa ndiyoko mna ndiyoko ndinje ndiyoko ndinje hap ndiyoko ndinje ndiyoko mna ndiyoko yo ibaphe halala yeah.
Wow, thank you, Sange. Thank you so much for always blessing us with your poetry. And thank you to you, members of the audience, for responding in such a vibrant manner. Thank you. Now, you might see some of that during the graduation ceremony as people come to graduate. It's safe. Just calm down. We are in Africa. It will be okay.
Good morning. I also join in congratulating the new graduates in their achievement. Siti Halala. The practice of a health sciences profession carries with it a duty to humanity. As Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to invite all those graduating in the Faculty of Health Sciences today and all health professionals present in the congregation to stand and join me in making the Health Sciences Declaration. If I can invite those to stand. All graduates in health sciences. Thank you very much. The pledge reads as follows. I solemnly pledge to serve humanity. My most important considerations will be the health of patients and the health of their communities. I will not permit considerations of age, gender, race, religion, ethnic origin, sexual orientation, disease, disability, or any other factor to adversely affect the care I give to patients. That's a long one, which, which I will forgive you for not repeating after me. The next one is, I will uphold human rights and civil liberties to advance health and even under threat. And even under threat. Right. I will engage patients and colleagues as partners in healthcare. I will practice my profession with conscience and dignity. I will respect the confidentiality of patients, present or past, living or deceased. I will value research and will be guided by its conduct by the highest ethical standards. I commit myself to lifelong learning. I make these promises solemnly, freely, and upon my honor. Thank you very much. We
We now turn to the part of the ceremony where we confer the degrees. By virtue of the authority conferred upon me, I admit to the degrees specified the candidates recorded in the program as graduating in absentia. I shall now admit to the degrees specified the candidates who will be presented to me by the different deans.
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the Postgraduate Diploma in Business Administration, Nomandla Mdetleni. For the Postgraduate Diploma in Management Practice, with distinction, Yasmin Abrahams. Fasiha Benjamin. Candice Teresa Bosman. Mohammed Shamil Kader. George Alfred Cave. Prince Chirwa. With distinction, Byron Granville Christie. With distinction, Kerry Davids. Michiki Johannes Lamini. With distinction, Uriel Faliba. Gary Fritz. Mercia Raminda Sofia Khavas. Istiak Hussein. Himla Nampola Ihua. Tamsin Marach Jardine. Lana Jajamis. Lekulana Emmanuel Kolobo. With distinction, Gavin Letley. Nicolene Khotatso Malachi. Kobisa Maninjwa. Olwen Amanda Leanne Manuel. Tivoho Michael Mabakisa. Tenele Lavdelea Messina. Viranzu Beauty Mshlongo. Christopher Pumlani Mkize. Tatenda Shungu Motsi. With distinction, Vuiseka Cornelia Mpongosha. Khanti Lomzi Nessi. Boipelo Mapitso Kakane. Mamela Ngubo. Mpomolelu Godfrey Slangalela. Jabulile Luleka Nokwe. Babalwa Piwakuzle Nyangeni. Eric Kwakye Obeng. Melanie Ann Peterson. Sanele Joy Rani. Benedict Douglas Rollinson. Bianca Joy Rousseau. Olivier Kamang Rum. Petrus Shipanga. Emanuela Lisangela Falcoa de Silva. With distinction, Mark Peter Stowe. Anna Ndabiseng Tekiso. Andre Marshall Tops. Sukile Tom. Nabo Tang Nimwena Yunona. Lizelle van der Berg. Albertus van der Westhuizen. Parvali Desiree van Letishu. With distinction, Karen Jean Wilson.
Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Bachelor of Commerce Honours in Information System, Azhar Rishad Abu Bakr. Zulfikar Ali. Marco Robin Daniels. Daniel Sean Jankalo. Riboni Mokasinyani. In statistics, Flavia Tawanga Natasha Mulenga. In taxation, Yolakazi Kue. Ibrahim Sakir. For the degree of Master of Commerce in Applied Economics, Linda Kushlin Josela. In Economic Development, with distinction in the dissertation and the degree with distinction, Anna Valentinova Filipova. In Finance, Ian Edmund Kuria Kamande. In Financial and Risk Management, Sitembiso Moses Harane. In Information Systems, Fahmi Jamil Davids. Vaughan Scott Henriquez. Isian Preston Lauriston. Ivode Indayishimiye. With distinction in the dissertation, Muhammad Amir Osman. In international taxation, Daniel Christian Hendrik Dutoy. Umbulelo Krodkwana. In investment management, Kevin van Staden. In organizational psychology, with distinction in the dissertation and the degree with distinction, Tamlin Ann Schwartz. For the degree of Master of Philosophy in Demography, with distinction in the dissertation, Benson John. In Mathematical Finance, Lloyd Stanley Bolshaw.
Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Master of Business Administration, Isham Abu Rahman. Simbra Rashe, Cleopas, Africa. Althea Maj Allen. Bashira Arnold. Olivia Jane Burton Barber. Andrew John Beard. Isaac Adamako Boma. Gerardus Bauer. Sarah Lynn Boyd. With distinction, Simon David Capon. With distinction, Taryn Lee Corrales. With distinction, Claire Danielle Carson. Michael James Chandler. Christo Nicholas Christodoulou. Donovan Duploy. With distinction, Lauren Jean Duprier. With distinction, Joe Donald Extian. Gerrit Joseph Fourie. Alpana Gulab. With distinction, Shilen Govender. Tamira Gunsberg. Sarah Ann Harriet. Mohammed Kashif Hartley. Tsitsi Rutendo Hatendi. With distinction, Andrew Michael Hickson Mahoney. Mariki Jeanette Hoffman. With distinction, Mutsa Ruby Karimakwenda. With distinction, Linda Mfundo Nkuzwayo. Vanessa Kirobo Kimura. Lauren Ann King. With distinction, Kira Koopman. Tinswalo Mumza Kubai. Nicholas Willem Kaelman. Matthew John Andrew Lecordia. Keenan Carlo Lest. With distinction, David Walter Leslie. With distinction, Walter Henry Skeels Lindop. Eladio Tori Linsau. Leon Lib. Tembumenzi Shishizwe Lukele. Clint Dion Maggot. With distinction, Hajra Mohammed Tashbai. Garth Denzel Malan. Theum Aubrey Murray. Chibundu Ichimiri Bagwu. With distinction, Grant McGill Frey. With distinction, Mauro Erasmo Mila. With distinction, Hans Werner Mennen. Jitendra Mishra. With distinction, Diane Elizabeth Molam. Friedrich Caputo Molenga. With distinction, Peter Muntali. Josephine Leonard Mushi. Alec Bale Batlile Mutlane. Nokutaba Ngwenya. Sonwabe Nongogo. Samson Zombe. Luke Joseph Lera O'Brien. With distinction, Oliver O'Brien. With distinction, Adrian Isaac Odendahl. Dominic Edward O'Hara. Paul Charles Olivier. Suleiman Patel. Petrus Jacobus Pinar. Garth Pillay. Leanne Pillay. Salika Rafik. Dungaze Muzila Rebelo. David Paul Riedlinghuis. James Temba Reed. Estia Rood. Marcel God Sarju. Akshay Sibalak. Amit Sharma. Fazil Sadubi. Niksha Singh. Christian Walter Smith. Julian Alistair Sparks. Alex Jane Staniland. Darren Edward Stechman. Donald Stewart. Londonani Shelidzi Tatsinde. Jacobus Petrus van Skalkwyk. Jacobus Andries van Zyl, with distinction, Oliver James Virgo. Graham Francis Wiley, Jason Eric James Williamson, Colin Rylett Wilson, Musa Ali Zuma, in executive management with distinction, Haroon Ahmed Abrahams. With distinction, Jonathan Edward Agate. Rufin Mombilo Asuka. Khanti Mlungisi Bam. With distinction, David John Bennett. Alexandra Richard Byrne. Andries Francois de Wet. With distinction, Fortune Yewokai Guamania. Asanda Kidana. Yashodan Govender. With distinction, Ian Gerald Haddon. With distinction, Ismail Sheikh Latif Hendricks. Boniswa Debbie Heaney. Barbara Alice Eichen. Leonora Kamba. Eliane Edwiga Blanche Kanga. Mkolisi Kutuma. With distinction, Cheryl Jane Kujenga. With distinction, Keribone Franz Mangena. With distinction, Blessing Tabane Mate. Sipokazi Patience Minyong Yeni. Zanele Crescentia Spumalo. Stanford Nia Muziwa. Mosley Taboa Rushesha. With distinction, Margarita Riet Simmons. Jerome Nathan Thomas. Calvin Donald Thompson. Johannes van den Heever. Gerard van der Walt. Randall Rowan Wilson. For the degree of Master of Commerce in Development Finance, with distinction in the dissertation, Kirsten Huberta Amsterdam. With distinction in the dissertation and the degree with distinction, Mary Ann Afua Boakia. John Wiseman Chiromo. Oni Nia Yukweni Mvula. Peter Michael Finlay. With distinction in the dissertation and the degree with distinction, Anthony Gosler. Charlene Govender. Litaletu Koboka. With distinction, Tainia Kamanga. With distinction in the dissertation, Christopher Ngolwe Kambole. Sharon Takudze Karimatsenga. Michelle Diana Mushini Maloba. Simon Shlomai Marandu. Nolita Mpo Matsolo. Tulile Pretty Mkwanazi. With distinction in the dissertation, Mololetelo Isabella Motsepe. With distinction, Onisimo Mazai Moyo Tawanda Michunguri. With distinction, Onisimo Mazai Moyo Tawanda Muchinguri. So is that Clive? With distinction in the dissertation, Clive Mutale Mulumba. Betty Murambadoro. With distinction in the dissertation, Julius Niera Namola. With distinction in the dissertation, Leonard Mutsikozi Leni Nkotso. Patient Makutu Nzonde. Ezekiel Chisinga Sikele. Nokutula Selamolela. With distinction in the dissertation, Guanato Tennis Soroka. Matabo Innocentia Sisele. With distinction in the dissertation, Michael Sibanda. Kishal Suka. Deborah Lee Swanepoel. Lawrence Utiwa Tabo Chonga. With distinction, Isaac Wahito. For the degree of Master of Philosophy in Inclusive Innovation, with distinction, Brian Gachichio Karanja. With distinction, Sinkobile Sishelisile Ndlovu. Brett David Yushin.
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Astronomy for a thesis which uses the Southern African Large Telescope to survey the properties of stellar populations in starburst and interacting galaxies, to understand the context of galaxy formation and evolution in general, Rajin Anand Rampul. In biological sciences, for a thesis which revises the South African hermit crab fauna, explores microct and genetic barcoding techniques in crustacean taxonomy, and describes 3 hermit crab species as new to science, Janus Lanshoff. In botany, for a thesis which shows that edaphic factors and the biogeography of rhizobia influence the distribution of legumes in the core Cape subregion of South Africa, Nkosinati Meshek Dludlu. For a thesis which shows coexistence of open and closed canopy alternate biomes, such as forest and fynbos, is driven by a steep turnover in environmental conditions and plant traits, which together act to limit invasion from the alternate biome, Simon Crispin Power. In chemistry, for a thesis which investigates the use of metal ions to improve the bioavailability of anti-tubercular drugs, Khadija Tololupe Dauda. For a thesis entitled Synthesis and Investigation of Benzimidazole and Carbazole beta-hemotin inhibiting scaffolds with Antimalarial Activity, Fabrizio Paolo Levate. For a thesis which examines the conversion of naturally abundant chitin into 6-deoxy-6-aminochitosan, a water-soluble polymer which was formulated as a nanofiber with application as an antimicrobial and utility as a catalyst support, Shakila Syed. In computer science, for a thesis which contributes to the design and evaluation of a robust and cheating-resilient auctioning algorithm for power allocation in resource-constrained smart microgrids, Mufudzi Anesu Chapman Marufu. For a thesis entitled Modeling Evolving Clinical Practice Guidelines, The Case of Malawi, Yamika Joseph Msosa. In conservation biology, for a thesis which uses an inclusive socio-ecological approach to show the long-term conservation impact of protecting mountain catchments on the environment and its water supply, Petra Brigitte Holden. In environmental and geographical science, for a thesis which identifies dry land dust sources at the landform scale, allowing for a detailed study of dust emission controls and mineral composition, thus making a contribution to better global atmospheric models, Johanna Regina Katharina von Holt. In molecular and cell biology, for a thesis which shows that the injectable contraceptive MPA increases HIV-1 infection via mechanisms different to the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, and that relative levels of the glucocorticoid and progesterone receptors influence HIV-1 infection and gene expression, Alexis Joanna Beck. in Ocean and Atmosphere Science for a thesis which explores the seasonal variations of the Agulhas Current using shallow water models to reveal the importance of simulating Rossby wave propagation speeds, Catherine Alessandra Hutchinson. In zoology, for a thesis which shows that there is geographic variation in morphology and echolocation in an African horseshoe bat, and that this is driven by environmental differences, Tinyiko Given Maluleke.
For the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Business Administration, for a thesis which describes the process of industry emergence, leveraging the concepts of socio-political and cognitive legitimacy, and possible application to the emergence, development, and evolution of industries in the African continent, Kenneth John Davidian. For a thesis which shows that South African firms are exposed to time-varying and asymmetric currency risk, and that corporate currency risk management using foreign currency derivatives and foreign currency denominated debt has no beneficial impacts on corporate value, Mashukudu Hartley Molele. For a thesis that suggests that the risk-reward trade-off prompts South African banks to use residential mortgage loan securitization for regulatory capital arbitrage, thus reducing their capital requirements while increasing their liquidity and profit, although it dampens their stability and legitimacy. Sophie, Claude, Anik, Ngwepi, Cassie, Epsi, Kangma. For a thesis which delineates the typology of current leadership in higher education sector, elucidates the challenges facing its leaders, and proposes a leadership model to enhance leadership within higher education in South Africa, Cyril Agnes Walters.
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Economics, for a thesis which shows that poverty and parental education are the main drivers of parental decisions on child labor and schooling, and reveals that cash transfer programs and women's empowerment are important for children's education attainment and reduction in child labor. Rebecca Nana Ya Aifa. For a thesis which shows significant wage differentials across regions in South Africa and how access to markets and regional factor endowments exacerbate and constrain regional wage disparities, Gibson Mudiriza. in information systems. For a thesis which examines ICT-supported formal women's business networks in Kenya and South Africa, Olufunmi Lola Deborah Ajumobi. For a thesis which shows how to integrate into the curriculum the novel subject of green information systems, which is the collaboration of people, technology, and systems thinking to conserve the environment. Caroline Jane Dunton McGibbon. For a thesis which shows that secondary school students use mobile net devices to plan academic activities and for better student understanding of topics, and that this type of effective use of mobile devices outside the classroom can improve academic performance. Samuel Dick Mwapwele. In quantitative finance, for a thesis which extends the numerical technique of recursive marginal quantization to improve accuracy and efficiency, and applies the approach to several popular and challenging models in mathematical finance, Ralph Rudd.
Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Chemical Engineering for a thesis entitled Towards Identifying Platinum-Anchored Sites on Carbon via a Model Electrochemical System, Adrian Charles Fortuyn. In construction economics and management, for a thesis which develops the causal model that demonstrates the predictive influence of public sector targeted procurement strategies mediated via supply chains on the growth and development of historically disadvantaged small and medium-sized contractors in South Africa, Abdul Rauf Adit Iran. In geomatics, for a thesis which develops a hybrid land administrative model that prescribes how to include all stakeholders in the development of customary land in peri-urban customary areas in Ghana, Williams Obeng.
Vice Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Bioinformatics for a thesis which identifies the genes that cause altered virulence between two strains of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, John Mitchell Emler. In clinical pharmacology, for a thesis which describes the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics of tuberculosis treatment in TB HIV co-infected patients from South Africa and West Africa, and provides evidence for dose adjustment for the current treatment regimen. Maxwell Tawanda Chirehwa. in emergency medicine for a thesis which shows the South African triad scale is a reliable and valid scale across a variety of low-resource settings, Mohammed Khan Dalwai. In exercise science, for a thesis which advances the field by showing how strain, perception, thinking, and action are coupled, and how their dynamic interactions determine alterations in observed pacing behavior and endurance performance. Andreas Van Horst. In medical biochemistry, for a thesis on differential lipidomic profiling of Mycobacterium tuberculosis genotypic strains and urine of TB suspects for biosignatures of TB disease through liquid chromatography mass spectrometry. Zandile Cleopatra Mlamla. In medical microbiology, for a thesis which elucidates the subcellular recruitment of molecular machine implicated in the emergence of drug resistance in Mycobacterium tuberculosis and demonstrates the potential utility in developing novel compounds as anti-evolution drugs to limit bacterial adaptation under stress. Michael Anton Reicher. In medical virology, for a thesis that investigates the biological risk factors of HIV infection in young South African women and assesses the impact of genital infection on HIV risk. Smerty Darby. In medicine, for a thesis which shows that an early differentiated CD4 T cell subset with the ability to secrete cytokines may be associated with reduced susceptibility to TB and therefore be potential correlates of protection to TB in humans. Nishta Gilmet. In physiotherapy, for a thesis which implemented a prospective injury surveillance system in Rwanda soccer players over 2 seasons, developing a novel coach-led injury prevention program to lower limb injury incidence and generated positive behavior changes in coaches towards injury prevention. Asuman Nuhu. For a thesis which shows that in district hospitals in Rwanda, training in health professionals in interprofessional collaboration based on the International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health Framework improves their knowledge, attitudes and practice, and more holistic patient management. Jean-Baptiste Sakahutu. For a thesis which describes the process of development and validation of a proxy health-related quality of life measure for very young children. Janine Bridget Verstraat. In psychiatry, for a thesis which highlights the need for parent education and training for autism spectrum disorders and shows the importance of evaluating outcomes, processes and procedures, and the implementation landscape to ensure sustainable and scalable programs, particularly in low-resource environments. John Joseph Saunders Dawson Squibb. For a thesis which appraises the current evidence for task-shifting interventions for mental health in sub-Saharan Africa and demonstrates their acceptability, feasibility, and preliminary efficacy in South Africa. Ndogozo Goodman Sibeko. For a thesis identifying the therapeutic alliance as an important contextual risk factor in the ethical management and assessment of violence risk in forensic mental health. Tanya Swart Babo.
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honour to present to you for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Drama, for a thesis which asserts theatre's value in understanding and broadcasting knowledges of city spaces as constructed through everyday life, and how this ongoing spatial construction constitutes an ever-evolving sense of place in the city. Alexandra Kathleen Halliday. In education, for a thesis which explores how the character of the affiliated religion of 4 religious schools relates to the forms of social cohesion privileged by the schools in the projection of particular forms of student identity. Anthony Robin Kaywood. For a thesis showing that evaluations performed by mathematics teachers and learners constitute and distribute restricted and fragmented forms and arrangements of computational resources in working-class school contexts, while they are varied and interconnected in upper-middle-class school contexts. Shahida Jaffa. For a thesis which illustrates the complexity of the learning experiences of African language speakers as they transition from theory to practice in the field of occupational therapy, Matumo Catherine Marafikang. For a thesis based on research that used an e-play makerspace to develop design principles for teachers to use emerging technologies to innovate, create, and transform their teaching in their own particular contexts, Isabel Tarling. In English language and literature, for a thesis which demonstrates how economic anxieties influence and encourage dehumanizing depictions of people with psychological disabilities in medieval and early modern literature, Tara Juliet Corinna Leverton. For a thesis which demonstrates that immersion in the apartheid censorship archive offers a way of tracing a South African literary genealogy and the politics of literary taste as it emerges in the present day, Rosa Frances Lister. In linguistics, for a thesis which investigates and describes acoustic differences in voice quality in South African English as linked to speakers' ethno-linguistic backgrounds, Bruce Rory Wileman. In media studies, for a thesis which explores the role that networked digital technologies, particularly mobile devices, play in visual creative practice and participation among a group of aspiring designers in Cape Town, South Africa, Marika Anker Venter. In sociology, for a thesis entitled Youth Employability in Ghetto Neighborhoods, the role of personal agency in reproducing or transforming social structures, Merlin Keith Ince.
Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Commercial Law, for a thesis which applies the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights to advance appropriate participatory governance frameworks for the extractive industries in Africa, with particular reference to Nigeria and South Africa, Omogboyega Oyeni Abe. For a thesis considering how freemium music business models prevent innovative copyright uses, thus adversely affecting the viability of copyright owners as firms, and proposing ways for copyright and competition laws to regulate business models using copyrighted content in advertising, Chijioke Ifeoma Okore. For a thesis providing an analysis of how the right of every person to access adequate housing in Zimbabwe might be enforced as a constitutional right, despite the Constitution not explicitly guaranteeing such a right, Justice Alfred Mavedzenge. For a thesis which shows that were public officials to embrace Ubuntu as communal obligations in the exercise of their duties, their doing so would help to realize vulnerable people's socioeconomic rights and to create a just and caring society. Nadim Sali.
Isn't that an appropriate thesis title to end our graduation on? One that is committed to Ubuntu and human rights. And let's give another cheer for all of our graduates and all of their hard work. We've had a wonderful ceremony. Congratulations to the graduates. Those of you who are graduating from the University of Cape Town for the first time are joining a global community of convocation of our alumni, some 170,000 people in South Africa and around the world. And it's an important constituency that preserves the standards and the continuity from the past through to the future. The convocation also has the role of electing the Chancellor, of electing members to the Council of the University, which is the governing body, of giving us feedback on how we're doing, on being our ambassadors all around in your workplace and wherever you're living. And we want to be able to communicate with you, to send you the electoral ballots. We want to send you quarterly newsletters to tell you how your university is doing and to get feedback from you. And I appeal to you in joining convocation to keep us informed as you move around the world, as you change email addresses, that we are able to find you and communicate with you. And one day, since you're all going to be so successful, to give us money and to support the university. The university needs more than just what the government and what the fees can give us. And as I said earlier, you go out as ambassadors, and I hope you will reflect the values of social justice and that we are so committed to. But for now, it's time for you to celebrate, and I'm sure you will want to show your appreciation to the loved ones in the audience who have stood by you emotionally and financially and morally. And so I invite the graduates to stand up and make eye contact with your loved ones in the audience, to wave those scrolls above your head and to shout your appreciation to them. And I know graduates will agree with me that you also could not have achieved what you've achieved today without the support of your lecturers and professors and supervisors on the stage. And I invite you to show your appreciation to them too. And I add my appreciation on behalf of the university. The last few years, while these students have been studying and doing their masters and doctorates, have been tough years for the university, tough years for the staff. And we've got through it, and we've got through it well because of your resilience, your commitment, and our reputation more than anything else depends on your ability to maintain that research program, to generate research funds, to attract students and doctoral and postdoctoral students, and you've done so well for the university. I want to thank you all on behalf of the university for a job well done. And there is another constituency of staff at the university. The academics form about 1,400 staff, and there are another 4,000 who are the professional and support staff who make sure that the university keeps going, who ensure that this graduation takes place, that the financial aid happens, that the residences function, that the venues are cleaned, that we feed the students, and the numerous administrative functions that ensure that this is a smooth-running and well-run organization without which we could not deliver the education and research that we do. So I invite you to show your appreciation to the professional and support staff of the university, and especially the faculty officers that have managed the graduation today. And through you, I want to thank them all as well for the support you have all offered me over the decade. And a special thanks to the tribute paid by the Vice-Chancellor Designate, Professor Pakeng. This is going to be a seamless transition with Professor Pakeng having been here for some 2 years already. A born leader, someone who I feel really confident we're handing the university over to someone in whose hands this is going to thrive and flourish. And I want to wish you well for the future as well. Congratulations. Congratulations to you all.
Thank you, Dr. Price. That was a wonderful ceremony, wasn't it? Amazing. I don't know whether you were listening to the praise singings and what people were saying as the graduates were walking the stage. I had a lot of things. I had people asking for mayonnaise, tomato sauce. I had people praising their wives. Like, you know, I had people saying, now I'm married to a doctor, you know, which is fantastic. So congratulations to all of you who graduated today. As you walk out of this hall with your degree or your diploma, let me remind you that you will experience uncertainties, risks, dangers, opportunities in the future. But I want you to consider all of them, good or bad, simply as the raw materials out of which you will fashion your own new worlds. You do not need to be confident about what events might bring, but you do need to be confident in your own capacity to master events and to respond to them with grace and with intelligence, whatever events might occur. During your study here at UCT, we have endeavored to nourish your faith in yourselves. We may not have always been perfect in doing that, but with our imperfections, we have tended to your knowledge and your vision. We've striven to give you opportunities to experience yourself as capable and effective men and women. So go out there and take up the challenge to become leaders in your chosen fields. It will not be easy, because this constantly changing world of ours is not easy. So you will no doubt face insoluble problems. But it is the wish of all of us here on stage that you may encounter the unimaginable adventures that lie before you with the same verve and intelligence, with the same unfailing self-respect, with the same moral courage, with the same pleasure and delight that you have displayed during your time studying here at UCT. I wish you, all of you, the strength, the faith, and the courage to succeed in everything you do. So go out there, be free, and achieve it. Congratulations. After this announcement that I'll be making, I request that you stand and you remain standing to allow the procession to leave the hall. Graduates, please join the procession at the end, and then proceed to the bottom of the stairs as far as University Avenue Take pictures, we'll be there, selfies are still free. So take pictures, enjoy this day, which is your day. Ladies and gentlemen, I request you that you stand for the Vice-Chancellor to dissolve the congregation.
By virtue of the authority conferred on me, I now dissolve this congregation of the University of Cape Town.